Holness presided over the meeting of the Cabinet today. And certainly, as is his usual practice, he will update the nation on all the measures that the Cabinet has agreed to concerning the COVID-19 pandemic affecting Jamaica as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. The Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Thank you, Naomi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Media
Good evening,
Center
everyone.
here at the Office of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, presided over the meeting of the Cabinet today.
To the
and certainly, as
newly
is his
upgraded
usual practice, he will update the nation on all the measures that the Cabinet has
press
agreed
room.
to concerning the COVID-19 pandemic
been
affecting Jamaica
out
as
of
well.
commission for almost
Prime Minister
5
of
years,
Jamaica.
for a very long time, and it has been totally renovated. Thank you, Naomi. This has been in the works now for approximately 2 years, 3 years, approximately 3 years, and it has finally been completed and upgraded, has been commissioned into service about 3 days ago, and today would be its first official use. I hope you find the setting appropriate and comfortable. And again, welcome. It has now been approximately, this has been 3 years, and it has been commissioned into service about 3 days ago, and today would be its first official use. I hope you find the setting appropriate and comfortable. And again, welcome. It has now been approximately a month, 29 days, since we had our first confirmed case of COVID-19, and that was on the 10th of March. We now have 63 confirmed cases out of 907 tests conducted. And relative to other countries in the region, we have been fairly successful in controlling the spread of the disease to this point. We are, however, by no means out of the woods, and neither are we about to become complacent. We must maintain and reinforce the safeguards and measures that have resulted in our successes so far. It is becoming increasingly clear that at least until a vaccine is developed, COVID-19 and possibly other similar threats may become continuing features of our daily life. The challenge before us is to transition to a new normal. A new normal way of life with COVID-19. We have to find a way to allow our economy to function and at the same time maintain safe practices such as hand washing and sanitizing, social distancing, staying at home as far as possible, especially if you are ill or at high risk, wearing masks, etc., to prevent the spread of the coronavirus SAR2. There are people who are advocating for a complete lockdown of the country. And we can understand why this is so. Many of us who are at home are glued to our televisions. We are seeing reports on international media which are displaying what other countries are doing, which includes some countries have gone to the extreme of a total lockdown. A total lockdown, as I've said before, is one tool in the toolkit available to governments. but it is a tool that we should use and reserve for the most extreme circumstances. And of course, if there is a lockdown, the impact on our economy would be severe. What we need to understand as a country is that we have to pursue both the health imperatives and the economic imperatives concurrently. We cannot pursue one at the expense of the other. We must pursue both. And I want to reinforce this point because as I get the calls from the average citizen concerned about the spread of the disease, and as I said earlier, I've been watching the television and seeing the impact of lockdowns and how they have managed to contain the disease. So too have we gotten the calls from the small business owners who have totally lost their businesses. They've seen their custom dry up. They've seen their demand for their products totally disappear, and they're very much now uncertain, wondering what is the next move. And as we put in place new measures, and these measures limit movement and indeed limit in some ways trade and custom, the concern is, how will we survive? How will we survive? So the strategy of the government, and to be clear, is not to shut down our economy. That is not the strategy of the government. And I want to assure businesses that the government is not seeking to go into a total lockdown. That is not what we want to do. We want you to, in your planning, to be comfortable that the government is moving with great discernment and discretion and consideration. So as we implement the measures, we review them. The ministers can tell you that we review them almost on a daily basis to make sure that we are trying to fulfill the two objectives: contain an easy task. And I want to place on your screen a matrix so that you can have an appreciation of what could be the outcomes if we go to any extreme. So on the right of the matrix would be the public health policies that government could implement. And there is a spectrum. You could decide that we're not going to do anything and allow the disease to spread, and hopefully the population will get immunity. Or we're going to put in the strongest control measures and slow down the spread of the disease. At the bottom of the matrix, we have the possible range of economic policies. We can say, well, this is going to pass. We don't have to intervene in the economy. If people lose some income, well, they have to depend on their savings, but the government is not going to take up its own, the resources that it has in reserves and spend. And we're not going to give any support to businesses. That's one set of economic policies that could be considered by the government. Or the government could go to the extreme and say, we are going to go full in with all the resources that we have early in the game and try to have a counter-cyclical effect on what is happening. Now, clearly, if you take a lax approach to public health policy to say, let it happen, and you take a lax approach as well to your economic policy where it is weak and ineffective, then what you will have is a catastrophe. You will have your economy collapse, and it will be a prolonged collapse of your economy. If you go with a very strong economic response, but at the same time have a weak public health response, then you will have some growth, but it will be weak, and it will not be sustained, because you will constantly have the health problem affecting your economy. And if you go with a very strong health response, but a weak and ineffective economic response, you will still have a weak and slow economic recovery. So you can't go with the extremes on either. You really have to do the extremes on both. That is the best solution. So you have to have a very strong health policy response, which I don't believe anyone can question, that Jamaica has put in place a very strong health policy response. And we have also put in place a fairly strong economic policy response. And, you know, the Minister of Finance has said, and I endorse what he has said, that this is the first time that Jamaica has been in a position where it can actually define and deploy an economic intervention program with both support and other forms of assistance to businesses and the private sector. Support for our workers, support for our most vulnerable, and support for our businesses and private sector activities. It's the first time at a comprehensive program which will be launched tomorrow. So we are doing both things. And I've taken the time to say this because we get a lot of calls and messages from persons in the private sector. We get a lot of calls and messages from just average citizens panicking because there's this great sense of uncertainty. And what I want to do today from this platform is to say to the country, yes, these are difficult times. We can't tell you with any great certainty what the future will hold. But I want you to have some confidence and faith that the government is taking this very seriously. We are dedicating almost all our effort and resources to this. We have sought to have both ends of the spectrum, the health spectrum and the economic spectrum. We are seeking to have those policies implemented to the fullest. And I believe that generally, and from what you can see from where you are, that we have been fairly successful to date. And I want you to have confidence as well that we will come out of this crisis, that there is life after COVID, and that you should continue your plans for your economic activities and all your other activities. Don't scrap them. Keep on making those plans and seeing how best you can advance those plans, because it is having those plans in place that we will come out of the economic doldrums and have a fast recovery after we have come out of the health crisis. We're entering the Easter holiday, and Easter is a time of reflection. It is a time when we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. But it is also a time when we acknowledge the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for our salvation. And the contemplation of sacrifice, the reflection on sacrifice, all of us must make a sacrifice for the recovery of the nation. All of us must make a personal sacrifice in changing the way in which we go about our daily lives. It might be not a common practice to wash your hands and sanitize after touching an unknown surface, but that has to become a part of your life. Definitely, and I get the calls that it is not our usual habit to stay at home on the weekends and having to rush home before 8 p.m. It's definitely, many people see it as an imposition. And indeed, I tend to agree with you. We are a free society. But we all at this time have to reflect in the Easter on the importance of sacrifice. And we ask all Jamaicans to make the sacrifice. I am particularly pleased with the effect of the stay-at-home, stay-in-place orders that have been given. That in general, they have been followed. I'm actually very proud of what my people have done. I'm very proud that they have, by and large, without much enforcement, without need for what we see other countries have done, that our people have followed the orders. The measures that we have contemplated are designed, as I said before, to allow as much economic activity as possible without compromising the health of our people. The Easter period presents us a perfect opportunity to slow the spread of the disease during the third incubation period since our first confirmed case and the second incubation period since the arrival of incoming passengers between the 18th to the 23rd of March 2020. And when we say incubation period for this disease, we're talking about the 14-day period. And that is how we analyze the effectiveness of policies based upon the incubation cycle of the virus. The stay-at-home orders are designed to specifically limit unnecessary movement of people, which will limit the movement of the virus. And I've said it in that particular way because the virus can't move without us. The virus moves around when people move around. And so limiting the movement of people will limit the movement of the virus. We have some adjusted orders, therefore, for the curfew, as we had indicated yesterday. From 8 p.m. tonight, Wednesday the 8th of April 2020, to 6 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday the 9th of April 2020. That will be the curfew hours, starting from tonight to Thursday. And then from 8 p.m. on Thursday, the 9th of April, 2020, to 7 a.m. on Friday, the 10th of April, 2020. During the Easter weekend, the curfew will be from Friday, the 10th of April, 2020, through Monday, the 13th of April, 2020. The curfew will commence at 3 p.m. in the afternoon and end at 7 a.m. the next morning. In other words, the non-curfew hours, that is the period of time that you will be able to move about freely and conduct the essentials of life, would be from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily over the Easter weekend. So let me walk it through day by day. I mean, I've put it in the legal language, but let me walk it through day by day. So tonight, which is before the Easter weekend, the curfew is as normal as was the previous order, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Thursday morning. Then on Holy Thursday, the curfew is from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. Good Friday. In the Easter weekend now, granted you're in the Easter weekend already from Good Friday, but you understand what I'm saying. So for Friday, for Good Friday, the curfew would begin at 3 p.m. The curfew begins at 3 p.m. Remember now, the previous curfew order was 8 p.m. So now what we have done is to tighten the curfew a little bit during the Easter period. So remember what I said about sacrifice and Easter? And Easter, of course, being a time when we should really be at home reflecting on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the sacrifice he made for our souls. The curfew would continue on Saturday, again, 3 p.m. on Saturday to 7 a.m. on Easter Sunday. It would continue 3 p.m. on Easter Sunday to 7 p.m. on Easter Monday. Yes. So everybody should understand that point. Now on Easter Monday, the curfew will start at 3 p.m. and ends at 5 a.m. Tuesday morning. So we're going to make some sacrifices during the Easter period, and then we give a relaxation afterwards. So the new curfew rules after Easter, the new nightly curfew rules after Easter would be 9 p.m. starting on Tuesday to 5 a.m. Wednesday morning, continuing through to the 21st of April 2020. So again, the critical points to note. Where we will not be impacting significantly economic activity, we take the opportunity to slow down and limit the movement of the virus around in the population. After that, we would, having reviewed the last few days of the original curfew orders, and we have seen that people have followed the orders faithfully, we can give a little bit more latitude, providing, of course, that people still continue to faithfully follow the orders, and therefore the movement between the period of 9 p.m. at night to 5 a.m. in the morning would be limited. But you have a greater period of movement starting at 5 a.m. in the mornings, before you were at 6, to 9 p.m. in the nights before you were at 8. So we have given 2 additional hours of movement. I want to say a few words about markets. Markets are a high-risk area. I visited the Coronation Market on the weekend, and I do have concerns. And it's not just the Coronation Market, it's all the markets across the island. And it's not just markets. It's the long lines that I'm seeing, people collecting their pension checks, people collecting their path benefits, persons using the banks, the queuing to get into supermarkets. All of those things are of concern to us, and we have put in place orders to address that, and we ask the public to maintain the social distancing. We ask the public to maintain the gathering orders, no more than 10. As it relates to markets, Holy Thursday is the largest shopping day in Jamaica, I'm told, by the retailers. Again, we're not going to try to curtail business, but we have to bear in mind that if you're going to conduct business, you must follow the orders given as it relates to hygiene, social distancing, and gathering. So for Holy Thursday tomorrow, markets will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. instead of the normal 6 p.m. closing. So you will recall that with the previous order, market days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we allowed 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Holy Thursday specifically and only, we will allow 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you have an additional hour to do shopping and so forth in the markets for Holy Thursday. On the Saturday following, the 11th of April 2020, markets will be opened from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we will limit the time available for market activities on the Saturday during the Easter weekend. So markets during that period, that is Saturday, the 11th of April 2020, markets will open at 7 a.m. instead of 6 and close at 2 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. After Easter, we will revert to the previous hours of Sunday to Wednesday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and Thursdays to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Important to note that markets and the commercial district will be closed on, let me read this carefully. Markets will be closed on Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and Easter Monday. And not just the markets, but the market district as defined. And this would include all areas for transportation hubs where there are vending taking place. And Minister, you might want to remind me, where else? The arcades and the arcades. So let me repeat that. The markets will be closed on Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and Easter Monday. And this will include the market district. It will include transportation hubs where there is vending taking place, and the arcades. Now, many years ago, I used to like going to the beach during the Easter period. So I'm reading this with a heavy heart. All beaches will be closed over the Easter weekend. Let me repeat that. All beaches will be closed over the Easter weekend. That means all beaches will be closed from Good Friday through to Easter Monday. There's been a lot of discussion, public debate about the wearing of masks. And the Chief Medical Officer gave a very considered position, advice to the public as to how we should treat with the wearing of masks. We're placing this advice now into the form of an order, having spent almost half of today, Attorney General, hammering out how it should be done. We have seen the various comments, and we appreciate and understand that sometimes the population is looking for definitive positions. Sometimes those definitive positions cannot be given. It really requires us to give broad advice and hope that the population will exercise good judgment. Where we see that there is a clear and present danger, existential threat, and we have the ability to enforce, then we try to codify or place them in order. So during the period from the 8th to the 21st of April 2020, and again, we try to have all the measures within a time frame because we don't want the orders to appear to be open-ended, and it is always subject to the progression of the epidemic because the orders are made because of the epidemic. So during the period from the 8th to the 21st of April 2020, the following categories of persons are required to wear a mask that is fitted to cover the nose and mouth. Now, let me just be clear that a mask is not necessarily the conventional paraphernalia that we are used to. It could be a scarf, it could be, but the masks that we are used to, which goes over your ears, we recommend those as the best types because they are functional, they have the material that filters the virus that we are trying to avoid. If you can get those, that's great, but what we really want is the covering of the nose and the mouth. So, during the period of the 8th to the 21st of April, the following categories of persons are required to wear a mask that is fitted to cover the nose and the mouth. Persons ill with respiratory or flu-like symptoms. And I'll ask the CMO at a later stage to describe what those symptoms could be, but I could venture a guess, CMO, that you mean you have a fever to start with, you have a persistent cough, you may have a cold, you might be sneezing persistently, Those are generally the symptoms that we are talking about. But there might be others. You might have difficulty breathing and so forth. Persons caring for someone at home with a flu-like or respiratory illness. 3, elderly persons over the age of 65. I think we made an error here. Senior persons over the age of 65. And I know I'll get a lot of quarreling about me calling people elderly. But our older citizens, 65 years and older, we require you to wear a mask. And persons with comorbidities should wear a mask. And what are comorbidities? I'll ask the CMO to, at a later stage, explain. But these are what we call the pre-existing conditions. Some of them are non-communicable diseases, the hypertension, the diabetes, as we said, respiratory illnesses, and a significant number of Jamaicans have those kinds of pre-existing conditions. But when you have multiple comorbidities, that is even more dangerous. And we are seeing that many of the 4 deaths that we have had, I think all of them would have had some form of morbidity, some form of underlying condition. And I believe 3 of them, CMO, would have had comorbidities, more than one. All four of the deaths that we have had multiple underlying diseases. During the period from the 8th to the 21st of April 2020, persons are strongly encouraged to wear a mask that is fitted to cover the nose and mouth while in public places. This is not in the order, but we strongly recommend it. If you are going to go to the market, if you are going to take public transportation, if you have to go to somewhere where there would be a lot of people, not necessarily gathered in tents or crowded, but still a lot of people in that area, wear a mask. And we recommend that. We highly recommend that to the public. Again, let me say, if you have to take public transportation, if you have to go to somewhere like the market, and again, let me say a few words on the market. If you have to go to the market, I know for some, the market is a pastime and an adventure. But during this period of time, make a shopping list. And when you go to the market, stick to that shopping list. And as you're finished, leave the market and go home. If hand sanitization stations are provided, sanitize your hands. And make sure to cover your nose and mouth. I want to say a little bit more on the stay-at-home orders. We have adjusted those. With effect from the 8th of April to the end of the 21st of April 2020, the following categories of persons shall remain at their place of residence, except that they may leave their premises once per day for food, medicine, exercise, and other necessities of life. Persons 70 years and over. You will recall that in the first set of orders, the stay-at-home order was targeted at persons 75 years and older. As we try to rebalance, and in that rebalancing, we recognize that our strategy has to move now towards protecting the vulnerable and protecting that category of the population who would have the greatest risk of death having contracted the disease. So we have lowered the compulsory stay-at-home age from 70, it was 75, we have lowered it now to 70. Persons who are ill with flu-like symptoms or respiratory symptoms, they must stay at home. Now, during this outbreak, I've got many cases of persons, many cases have been brought to my attention, of persons with flu-like symptoms who have said, oh, sure, it's just a little cold, or it's just a little flu, and they have merrily gone on their way. It so turns out that after they have fallen very ill and tested, they are positive for the coronavirus. But having gone on their careless escapades, they would have also infected others. So a part of the strategy of the government is to ensure that if you are ill with any symptom at all, which suggests a flu or a respiratory kind of illness, stay at home. So by order, if you violate this order, you can face penalties. And the CMO is saying, good luck with that. But the beauty of what we have done so far is not so much the prosecution, but that people understand the seriousness of what it is that we are doing, and they voluntarily comply with the orders. And that is what we are encouraging, that if you are ill with a respiratory illness, don't just think of yourself. Don't just say, boy, I have to go earn my day's pay. And you jump on a bus and you sneeze in your hand and then hold on to the rail. And then, you know, an unsuspecting senior citizen comes onto the bus, holds on to that same rail and gets ill. And she goes into hospital. She might very well get a ventilator, but the disease may be so aggressive that her probability of recovery is limited. Now, you gone about your business, you'll probably recover, quite unknowing that you have cost someone their life. We're also advising the following categories of persons to stay home. Again, persons with comorbidities and persons with respiratory illnesses. So even if you are not 70 years of age, even if you don't have symptoms of flu or respiratory illnesses, if you have these comorbidities, the diabetes, the hypertension, we recommend that as much as possible, you stay at home. If you don't have to be on the road, stay at home. If you have respiratory illnesses but you're not showing symptoms, you may have terrible sinusitis, you may have asthma. If you don't have to be on the road, if you don't have to go to the market, stay at home. Over the last few days, I've heard the complaints and the pleas of Jamaicans who want to come home, but because we have closed our borders to incoming passengers, they are unable to come home. Before I go into that, we were discussing the economy, and it came up that there is a view that our borders are closed generally, and it is having an impact on trade and the movement of cargo. I want to take this opportunity to say that none of the orders that we have put in place has in any way limited or restricted the movement of cargo and trade generally. Our ports and airports are open, wide open now to cargo. In fact, send in all the cargo and send out all the cargo. Let's keep the economy turning over. And that message needs to get out, not just locally, but internationally as well, because many of the people who we do business with, they may hear on the radio, they may hear what journalists and news reports say, and they may misinterpret. So I'm taking this opportunity to say that our ports and airports are open for incoming and outbound cargo. There are a number of Jamaicans that have been stranded overseas that have requested permission to come home. There are also persons that were sent overseas under government-sponsored programs whose employers have indicated a desire to repatriate them. We recognize that we cannot keep our borders closed indefinitely. However, we cannot put our population at risk of the spread as a result of additional imported cases. Let me say here that when we contemplated the decision to close the borders, we gave enough notice and we allowed an extension. During that period of time, our records show that approximately 7,500 Jamaicans came into the island. The condition of their arrival into the island is that they should self-quarantine, meaning they should quarantine at home, and that they should report. Those conditions were codified in the orders and emphasized over and over again. I am, can I say, partially pleased, if there is such a phrasing, but I'm heartened that as of yesterday, PS, we have seen of the 5,500 who remain in the island, of the 7,000 who came, 1,500 left, of the 5,500, 4,507 have made contact, meaning they have either called into the Ministry of Health through the various lines, they have emailed through the email address given, they have made contact through the COVID-19 website, or they would have called into the various health centers or so, and we have pooled all that information, matched that against the manifest, and we are certain that the names on the manifest match the names and other identifying records on the various databases that we have. We still have about 1,000 or so persons to make contact, and I'm taking this opportunity to encourage you, if you have not yet contacted the Ministry of Health, please do so. Now, I know that there is a stigma developing around COVID-19. We cannot allow that stigma to keep you from making contact. And I wish to use this opportunity as well to say to Jamaicans that, burning down somebody's house or threatening to burn down somebody's house because you suspect that they have the COVID-19 disease, or ostracizing persons because they have the disease, that is not the thing to do. It could happen to anyone, unknowingly. It could happen to you. And I'm certain that that is not how you would want to be treated. So we urge you, encourage people, don't ostracize them, don't threaten them. Be sympathetic to them, urge them to come forward, but don't hurt them. So if you have come into the island between the 18th of March and the 24th of March, and you have not yet made contact, please go on the jamcovid19.moh.gov.jm website and fill out the questionnaire there, or call 888-1-LOVE. Please make contact. And you may be asking, why? Why make contact? Well, let me give you an example. There is someone on the farm work program who came into the island. Luckily, he was one of those who heeded the advice, and he self-quarantined, and then he started to develop symptoms, and he called in to the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health was able to make contact with him. And that would have created a controlled circumstance around that person. We know who he was in contact with, and we would have been able to check those persons, and that is what we call a strong fence around the disease. We know knowledge builds a strong fence around the disease. There is a case of a couple that came in from the United Kingdom, and they too followed the advice, sent home their house staff, and they self-quarantined. They developed symptoms. They called into the ministry was able to get them, and they are now still under recovery. PSCMO, they're still recovering. Still recovering. Now, can you imagine that you've come in and you have the disease and you keep silent about it and you don't self-quarantine and you infect people and we don't know? That is how the disease spreads. So it is your duty as a Jamaican to ensure that we contain the disease. So, in a sense, opening up the borders again depends on how well we can get totally under control this unknown population that came in, and how they are keeping faithful to the quarantine requirements and reporting. We need to understand their health status before we taking new populations which would stretch the resources, because you should by now recognize how labor intense this is. And we can't just pick up persons and say, you go and do a contact tracing exercise. This is done by trained health professionals. Jamaica has one of the best public health system in the region. And to get a public health officer trained, it's not something that you can do in a month or even 2 months. So we simply, however, though we have high quality and high functioning professionals, we don't have enough of them to cover a mass population of persons. So we are now just getting on top of that 5,500. For us to take in a new set, we have to be certain that this population, which would be in their second incubation phase, in other words, their second 14 days, the CMO advises me that usually it is after 3 incubation phases that you can say that you have a fair confidence about assessing the spread of the disease. So we are only in the second phase, so we really at this point can't say that everything is all right with that population that has come in. So we still have a little time to go. We have, however, considered, we spent a lot of time on that today, certain protocols by which we would start to allow re-entry. Those protocols would entail state quarantine. For that to happen, we need to establish the rooms. We do have some rooms available, but certainly not enough, and we are trying to expand that very rapidly. It requires our ability to test people coming in. We have tests, but the question is, do we have enough personnel to do that? That requires some training and bringing on more skills to do that. And then we have to have an end-to-end protocol that when you land at the airport to the quarantine site, you are kept isolated from the population and under some form of control. All of that requires a massive logistics operation that I have asked the Minister of National Security and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to pull together that kind of logistics coordination and give it ministerial oversight. So hopefully by the next press briefing, we will be able to say something definitive as to where we are with making provisions for the controlled re-entry of Jamaicans. And let me just be clear from now, it cannot be a wholesale re-entry. We are not at that stage of the epidemic. And I know there are going to be many Jamaicans who will be calling me to say, no, Prime Minister, no, 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 keep the borders closed. And I'm certain that I will have another number of Jamaicans calling me to say, hurry up, Prime Minister, open up the borders. It's a very difficult decision, and it's not something that it's one of the toughest decisions I've had to make. I know people are having it really difficult in coming in their sojourn in other countries, and they want to come home. My final thing will be on testing. Again, much debate about the government's policy on testing. I will repeat, my own position is that I have supreme confidence in the protocols established for testing. I'm satisfied that the Ministry of Health is making the necessary provisions to increase their testing capacity and gathering samples. There is a challenge, of course. It's easy to increase as it turns out, it is easier to increase the testing capacity, which we have increased. It is a greater challenge to get the samples. Because to get the samples, you need the trained professionals who can take the samples, and you need persons who are willing to give the samples. And so there needs to be some amount of public education around that to increase awareness and compliance. And I'm certain that the Ministry of Health is putting in place all the protocols to assure that we can have a much broader base for testing. However, as I've said before, the testing that we have done, I have supreme confidence in its in that it is a true reflection of the level of spread in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I'll ask the Minister of Local Government, who is indicating that I should have said something about the supermarkets. I'll ask him to come and say it. Right, so the minister, we're showing a little private joke. The minister was reminding me that I've spoken about the practice of social distancing and hand sanitizing in the markets, and I have not spoken about the same practices being faithfully observed in supermarkets, because it's the same principle. And I have to reinforce that we're not discriminating one against the other. So the same practice of maintaining social distance, hand sanitizing, and wearing your mask, covering your nose and mouth should be practiced in a supermarket. I'm going to ask the Attorney General now to give an update as to where we are with the legislative agenda. No, I know, but I did it as well.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know that we are looking at a comprehensive review of the suite of legislation that enable us to put measures in place during times of disaster and hazards. On the instruction of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice has been charged with the responsibility of assisting the Ministry of Health to do a review, in particular, of the Quarantine Act, which is quite dated and requires up-to-date regulations and other provisions for the quarantining of persons. The Public Health Act is also under review for a better and up-to-date framework for public health and also the management of diseases, among other things. In the Ministry of National Security, we are revising the Immigration Restriction Commonwealth Citizens Act, and that is the act that regulates the entry of Commonwealth citizens into Jamaica, as well as citizens of Jamaica, and also the Aliens Act that deals with foreigners. We have a consequential amendment to do to the Constitution of Jamaica, a consequential amendment to the Emergency Powers Act in relation to a period of disaster. An amendment was made to the Constitution in 2012, which should have been carried through to the Emergency Powers Act, separating a period of public emergency from a period of public disaster. And that unfortunately was not done, and we are in the process of doing so. We also have had or dealing with the Disaster Risk Management Act. And as you know, it provides an all-of-government approach to the management of disaster. Now that we're utilizing it, we have identified areas for improvement and expansion, and the work has commenced. So arising out of the management of COVID, you will see a new and up-to-date suite of legislation in place to help us as we go into the hurricane season and beyond. I think that is as much as I will say at this time, Prime Minister, because all the matters will be brought to the Parliament and will be debated in due course. And just in respect of this new disaster risk management enforcement measure number 3, taking into account the ease of reading the document and having all of the provisions in place, the announcements made by the Prime Minister will be promulgated in a new single order, bringing together all the updated measures. So you do not have to look at the former orders and amendments made for ease of reference.
All right, so I think we could take questions.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. In keeping with our digital press conference, may I ask those on our Zoom call from the media, once you have a question, please use the emoji, the raising emoji to ask your questions. While we await to see who are the persons who are ready with questions, may I just acknowledge the fact that we do have members of the Cabinet, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of National Security, along with the Minister of Local Government, and of course the Attorney General. First up, who do we have? May I also ask that members of the media, when you are acknowledged, please ensure that your background is free from any distraction and your microphone is on. All right, we have the Jamaica Observer first, Althea Saunders. Althea, good afternoon. Can you ask your question, please?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, please.
All right, great. I have a question about the wearing of masks. Well, I need clarity first of all. Is it that the government is now recommending the wearing of masks for everyone, save for the categories which would be mandated under law to wear them? And secondary to that question, for those who under the order must wear masks, how will this be enforced, and would it not be more enforceable if all persons were mandated to wear masks?
I'm going to ask the CMO to come and help me answer that question. No, but so the question is the government recommending the wearing of masks? Absolutely, the government has recommended the wearing of masks. And in fact, the government has gone even further to place in an order the persons who are required to wear a mask. Now, there is a sense where there can be splitting hairs as to what is a mask versus covering nose and mouth. The objective is that you really, in public, you should cover your nose and mouth. A mask is a very convenient way of doing it because it is built in a particular way, and some pre-made masks are built with material that acts as very good filters. So we recommend that if you are going in public transportation, you should cover your nose and mouth, and a mask is a good way of doing that. And if you are generally in the public area, you should cover your nose and mouth, especially if you are in market. Now, if you are ill with flu-like or respiratory symptoms, you must wear a mask. If you are taking care of someone at home who is ill with respiratory or flu-like symptoms, you must wear a mask. If I consulted my notes, I believe the other category would be that if you are over 65 and you are going out in public, you are at home, you must wear a mask. And if you have comorbidities, you must wear a mask. So we have given strong recommendations, strong advice, and we have codified those categories of persons who are highly at risk who must wear a mask.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Let's go over to Mr. Damien Mitchell from
Sorry, the other question was, how do we enforce it? You know, the curious thing about these kinds of orders, it is for your own benefit. It is for your own benefit. So we have studied it, we have looked at it, we have analyzed the risk versus the reward of wearing a mask, and previously you would have heard the CMO explain that wearing a facial barrier carries some risks, because how you dispose of it and touching it can help to transmit the disease. We have had to assess, using the same assessment that other countries have done, that the widespread nature of the disease in the environment versus the benefit of blocking the transmission of the disease. So there is a benefit, but there is also a risk, and therefore it requires the citizen to use the masks, bearing in mind that they shouldn't touch it, the front of it, and they shouldn't adjust it too much, and if they're taking it off, they should take it off by the loop of the ear, and they should dispose of it appropriately. So these are advice that I think would be very useful for the average citizen to follow. And if it comes to a point where we see a clear case and an officer who is empowered under this act sees a clear case for enforcement, then I'm certain that they will enforce on it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Let's now go to Damien Mitchell from the Jamaica Gleaner. Damien?
Yes, thank you very much. One of the questions emerging is as it relates to schools. Is the government considering extending the school term or the school year for that matter? That's question one. And secondly, in respect of the 45 ship workers who said they were denied landing in Kingston last week, their specific request at this point is for some assistance in Portugal, where they are heading just now. And the third question, Prime Minister, the government has budgeted some $10 billion. The health ministry was reporting yesterday that it has so far spent $2 billion. What are the provisions in the event that you need more than this $10 billion?
Thank you very much for that question, Damien. I wasn't actually reading from the proposed gazetted order, but every educational institution as defined in the Education Act shall remain closed until the 22nd day of April 2020. That wasn't the question you asked, but it's important that we say it now so that parents are aware that schools will continue to be closed. The next time you will hear from, well, up until the 22nd of April. And then, as usual, we will give you enough advance notice of a decision to reopen or to close. Decisions about the extension of the school terms, decisions about PEP and those, in our next press conference, I'll have Minister Samuda here with me. I know he is having some discussions. I did not get the brief on them today, and so I don't want to speak on them until I'm properly briefed. But schools will remain closed until the 22nd of April. The question about the budget, I mean, that's clear. Whatever resources that is needed to fight this disease, the government of Jamaica will provide it within reason.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Our next question comes from Jonah Lee Campbell of NCU.
All right, good evening. Just a quick question with regard to all the closures that were mentioned with the upcoming Easter weekend. Why not a full 24-hour curfew?
Well, you'll remember that I placed up on your screen a matrix showing you that all of these decisions, and I want to just make it clear, all of these orders that we have made come with an economic price. And therefore, we can't just make the orders without considering the economic impact. So, objective number one, preserve life. Objective number two, ensure that you can live. So, so what we have been trying to do is a balance between very strong economic policy and very strong public health policy. And I think we have found that equilibrium position that will place us in that very green right-hand corner box that says strong economic rebound to pre-crisis levels. That is where we want to be. We want to come out of the crisis and rebound very quickly. What we don't want to do is for businesses to reach a point where they have to scale down, they have to lock down, and then it takes them a long time to restart. So even though they are losing some customers, they are losing some of their business, we're going to keep the measures to a point where they can continue to function, maybe even break even, maybe they make a loss, but they can sustain it for a period of time, get out of this crisis very quickly, and then move into a quick recovery. So even in Easter, Holy Thursday is a big sale day. Businesses make a lot of money. We want them to make a lot of money. Even during this period, we still want our essential services to operate. We still want our refinery to operate. We still want our farmers to farm. We still want those who are doing construction to keep on building. And when you don't have to be on the road, or when you would not ordinarily be on the road, well, then let's just shut down movement at that time. So it is a very wise use of time.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Let's go over to Brittany Clark from Nationwide.
Okay, hello, good evening, everyone. All right, so I have two quick questions. Firstly, other than the 4 COVID-19 related deaths already announced, are there other persons who have contracted COVID-19 and passed away, but their deaths were not considered COVID-19 related? And secondly, Prime Minister Holness, do you have any advice or guidelines for religious gatherings over the Easter holiday? Thank you.
Well, let me take that one quickly and then give the CMO and the Permanent Secretary some opportunity to reflect on your first question, which I wouldn't be able to answer. I had a meeting, a virtual meeting, with members of the religious community yesterday using this same method. I believe we're using Zoom. And we had a good meeting, which ended up being a prayer meeting. And I'm very encouraged by their response. They more than most understand the dangers, and they have been very supportive, and I'm actually very impressed that they have embraced the technology and that they are conducting their worship via technology. And what they have said to me is that spirituality has not been reduced by virtue of praying virtually. PS or CMO? Which?
Hey, good evening, everyone. In response to that question, I just want to say that this is why we had started several weeks ago the sampling of all our severe acute respiratory infections in hospital and testing them for COVID. So this was just to do that, to pick up any cases that might be there that there would have possibly been deaths from, to see if any of those would have been COVID positive. So we have been doing that testing, and so far we have not had, outside of the cases that we have reported, any other evidence of severe acute respiratory infections that were COVID positive.
Thank you, CMO. As we get ready to have another question from the media, Mr. Prime Minister, on social media, there are several persons who are saying that you weren't quite clear, sir, on the beaches issue. Does that mean that they can go to the rivers or falls?
That's a very good question and an important one. The purpose of these orders is to have you stay at home, to avoid gatherings like beaches and water parks. I don't know that we can say, well, AG, you answer that, the legal perspective.
Well, it's here, Prime Minister, that the beaches are closed and the water facilities are also closed. And as the Prime Minister has said, it is to ensure that persons are not gathering and engaging in activities that will put them at risk of transmitting or contracting the COVID. So yes, the beaches are closed. That include the rivers and the waterfalls and all other water attractions. And be reminded that places of amusement remained closed as defined. So we have the measures, a number of the measures, practically all of them in the existing orders have been extended with certain modifications. And generally, if we look at the suite of measures that are to be enforced, well, firstly, they're generally extended from today, April 8, to April 21. That's an additional 14 days. So we have reporting, quarantine, and monitoring measures in place. We have prohibition on gatherings over 10, and we have the social distance mandates. We have restrictions on visits to hospitals, nursing homes, and infirmaries, with additional restrictions in relation to infirmaries already in the existing orders. We have restriction on the opening of markets, arcades, stall vendings in transport center, which the Prime Minister announced not so long ago. And we have the market closures on Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and Easter Monday. We have placed duties on employers in relation to persons over 70 years and sick persons. You can't require them to come to work. We also have placed duties on the employer to provide hand washing and sanitization facilities. The work from home order is still in place, so you work from home where possible. And we have stay at home in relation to persons 70 years and older and those who are sick, as specified. And we have closure of certain establishments still in place. And Prime Minister has already gone through the wearing of masks. Generally, the new order will be gazetted and will be made available. And we have heard your pleas for the order to be published in numerous places, and I think that has been done. And we continue to monitor the comments that you make in ensuring that you're fully apprised of the measures that are in place. And I know the Prime Minister thanks everyone for abiding by the orders and implores everyone who's taking them lightly to heed the warning. This is about saving lives.
Thank you so much, AG. We're back to the media questions now, sir. Owen Brown from Roots FM. Owen? Do we have Owen up? All right, let's move to Dion Jackson Miller from the RJR Group.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Evening, rather. Thank you so much. Just reminding the PM that he hadn't answered the question about the assistance for ship workers in Portugal, first of all, just to remind him of that. Now, I understand you're trying, Mr. Prime Minister, to balance the issue of economic activity with reducing crowds. But would that not be better done by rather extending opening hours rather than restricting them? In other words, for instance, hairdressers, barbers, as well as the markets, rather than reducing the number of hours in which people can go to access these facilities, rather to lengthen the hours and still require people to be spaced out and not be crowded there. Two, just asking for the latest testing data, how many pending, and how many have been done recently. And finally, in relation to the orders for people with comorbidities to stay at home, how is that balanced if one is an essential service worker?
So thank you very much for those questions, Dion. Let me start with your first question. You would see that we did exactly what you proposed with the orders on the market. That we had originally said 2 to 6, and then we studied it carefully, and we saw that there was congestion by virtue of the limited time. And so from Thursdays to Saturday, which are the high volume days in the market, we extended it to 2 from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Thursday, Holy Thursday coming, we have added an additional hour so the market on Holy Thursday would open at 6 a.m. and close at 7. So your principle is correct that when we analyze it, if we see that we can reduce congestion by increasing opening hours, we will. Presently, we have many businesses, in fact, almost all businesses, now open by virtue of the curfew time. So they would be opening from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now, we have done exactly what you have said. Businesses can open now from 5 a.m., that is coming next week, Tuesday, to 9 p.m. So yes, the consideration that you have put in place, that you have asked me about rather, is a consideration that we have taken on board. As it relates to other establishments, Minister Mackenzie, remind me, what is the closing time for barbers and hairdressers? It was 5? From 10 to 5. That is something that we could re-examine. And you know, my objective is these orders are designed to reorder the society to promote the necessary work, the necessary economic activity, and to limit activities that could be postponed or not done or are unnecessary. In terms of the members of the cruise ship, the Jamaican crew on the cruise ship that is now on its way to Portugal, I won't answer that question specifically, other than to say that we discussed the issue of general support for persons who are stranded overseas. And what we have concluded on is that some of the funds that we have raised or are about to raise or will raise through the various efforts, that we will try to dedicate some of that to assist persons who are in distressed hardship overseas.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The CMO regarding the figures that were asked of as well. CMO?
As of last night, we had a total of 815 tests that were done, with 63 positive, 751 negative, and we have 1 pending result today.
You did 97 tests.
Yes, the Prime Minister had reported 900 and 7. So that number would be all the tests that were done, but this is in terms of the number of patients that were tested and would not include today's number that would take us very close to 900.
Thank you, CMO. Let's go to Edmund Campbell from The Gleaner. Edmund? Can we ask you to unmute your microphone, Edmund?
Right, good. Okay, 2 questions. CMO, could you assist us by providing some additional information in relation to the 4th person who has died from COVID-19? Just give us an idea of how this person contracted the disease, persons who have been in contact with this person, and whether those persons have been quarantined or isolated, as the case may be. And Mr. Prime Minister, you said earlier that at least until a vaccine is developed, COVID-19 clearly maybe become a feature in our daily lives. I know it's early days yet, and you have gone through all the restrictions that are in place, but would you be able to give us a forecast maybe as to when some of these restrictions might be eased in the future?
Well, what you would have seen already is the recalibration of the various restrictions, which have resulted in some easing in some respects and tightening in others. And we will continue to adjust and fine-tune with the objective of increasing economic activity and decreasing activity that could contribute to the spread of the disease. We have been operating on a 14-day cycle, which matches the incubation period. The CMO advises me that before we can take any decision as to the spread or the state of the epidemic, you would probably want to go through 3 or 4 incubation cycles. 3 incubation cycles before we can start to make assessments. Since the first case, we would be in the 3rd incubation cycle, which would be the 10th to now, would be in about the 3rd incubation cycle. But the challenge we face is that we have a population that came in, which is, we don't have enough information on that population. That is the 5,500 persons who came in. We are now gathering that information, and that population would be in about their 2nd incubation cycle. So it's very difficult for us to give you an assessment as to when we could start to, dispense with measures. It's very difficult at this stage to say that, because we are still not at a point where we have enough information on the spread of the virus to make any informed prediction or forecasting of the future. Simon?
Yes, the 4th patient that has passed is a patient that was admitted to the University Hospital. In our press conference yesterday, we had spoken about that case and the cluster of cases that were surrounding the investigation of that case. So far, we have tested some of the close contacts of that person, and we have found that there are 4 persons that are positive. So we continue to do the investigations, and more contacts of that person will be tested between tomorrow, because sampling has been done today. So they will be tested tomorrow, and we'll be able to give more information about contacts for that person.
Thank you, CMO. Question from Arthur Hall via text. Arthur, of course, from the Jamaica Observer. He's asking, has the cabinet considered opening bars and allowing them to have no more than 5 or 9 persons based on size to spur economic activity?
Just to give an update on the information I had given about the pending test result. So the pending test result is in fact negative. So therefore, of this 76 tests that we had done yesterday, we had no positive tests.
Thank you, CMO, for that update. Prime Minister, concerning bars.
You know, I see the Minister of Local Government smiling, and it's a difficult question because he's gotten that question so often. My own constituency, where I have the famous hip strip, where we used to have a dance for every day of the week, that all of that has dried up, and so I've asked to my constituency organization to do a survey now of all the bars and how they are surviving, all the owners and the barmaids and all the round robin people, how they are surviving, because we have to respond to them. So the answer, Arthur, is yes, we have discussed it, but we are not yet in a position where we can say open the bars. You will see right around the world, almost universally, that they have closed bars and areas of entertainment. And that is because of the nature of how the disease is spread. You're in close contact, you're drinking, you're in a happy mood, you're laughing, and it is in those actions that droplets are expelled and you know, your inhibitions are lessened. And it is in that condition, that circumstance, that it could spread. So, you know, some people are saying, CMO, that the rum will kill it. But there's no science to back that. So we have to stick with the science. Again, just to say that where we are in the epidemic, it is too early to say we can dispense with any measure. We have to see how it is evolving. And when you have an unknown population, you could have just out of the blue a super carrier, someone who goes to church, then goes and visits a friend, then goes to a restaurant, and then goes to, you know, a happy hour somewhere. And then you find that one person would have infected 70 persons, and then you wonder, where did all this come from? And that's why we're taking all the measures. We're learning from what has happened in other jurisdictions. What I have said has actually happened in other jurisdictions. So we just have to be careful, but we recognize that there's significant loss of income that people are now facing, which is why we have the CARE program, and we encourage those persons who are affected to apply tomorrow when the program is opened.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It's 7 o'clock. We'll just take our two final ones. Owen Brown from Roots FM is now back online. Owen, good evening. Go ahead.
Good evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're.
Thank you so much. Thank you for facilitating my questions. I have two questions very quickly. Regarding the drug for lupus and arthritis, hydrochloroquine, is it that Jamaica is thinking about using it? Will we go ahead in administering this drug for persons who may have contracted COVID-19? And my next question is regarding persons who are coming in. The Prime Minister mentioned that these persons who will be coming in, they will not be reintegrated in the general public. I know there is a plan for the national arena to be used for persons who will be isolated. But is the question regarding the hotels? Will the hotels be used now, or will there be another facility for these persons who will be coming in, you know, being accepted then? And it's, as the Prime Minister said, it's not a wholesale acceptance, but the facility for the persons that would be administered or accepted in. What would be the procedure for that? Thank you.
The CMO will respond to that. Thank you so much, Owen.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness has established a technical committee of experts from across the island who are responsible for reviewing the technical material that is available on various treatments that are being tried internationally. We also utilize the guidance documents that are provided by the WHO, who themselves have established expert panels to review the material that is available. As a result of our review, we have made a decision, and this is a decision that is supported by the WHO, that we will not include hydrochloroquine in our treatment protocols. However, we do recognize that there are various studies that are ongoing that are looking at the use of hydrochloroquine in certain sets of patients. And Jamaica has applied to be a part of the Solidarity study, which is being coordinated from the WHO. And in that study, we may have persons who fit a definite criteria who would be recruited to have that treatment. However, in terms of using that treatment, there are specific treatment and monitoring guidelines that would be strictly adhered to.
Thank you so much, CMO. And Prime Minister, the issue concerning hotels.
It would be convenient for the Ministry of Health in managing centralized quarantine facilities if we had mass accommodations such as hotel rooms. It would be easier for the provision of security, and you could have far more synergy and expansion in the capability of the staff that has to monitor and supervise and check on the persons under quarantine. So yes, we are studying that. The hotels are not going to be free, and neither will the meals and the other provisions and the utilities. So the government would have to figure out how we would pay for that, and that could be a significant cost. Indeed, those who are coming back would have to bear in mind that some of that cost would have to be borne by them as well. So we are looking for those provisions. And you know that the challenge is not everyone is going to want to have their facilities used in that way. So it is a process of engaging in dialogue and trying to develop a deeper understanding and to find the right contractual arrangement for the use of hotels and other such facilities. And you know, the truth is, we want to bring back our Jamaicans, but you know, we don't want to put them in a place where they're going to be uncomfortable. That will increase the risk of them leaving or trying to break the quarantine. So we have to find facilities that are up to their expectations as well. Those things take time to all get in a seamless and logistically well-planned way.
Prime Minister, we have a final question from our media colleagues on Zoom. While we get that one ready, there are several on social media who are asking you to clarify the work-from-home order for public sector workers and workers in general. When does that expire? Are they still able to work from home? And also, another question that keeps popping up on social media, what's the justification for reducing the curfew orders after the Easter period?
All right, well, let me take that one while the Attorney General comes to deal with the work-from-home orders. As I explained earlier, the objective is to go through an iteration of all our measures and refine them in such a way as to promote economic activity whilst reducing any risk from those activities, and to reduce activities that are high-risk activities but may not bring any economic activity. So we looked at it very carefully. We saw how persons managed the curfew orders before. In general, I would say 95% of Jamaicans observed the curfew. They stayed home. There was not a significant amount of enforcement that was necessary. That says to us as planners, policymakers, that we could increase the number of productive hours, allow people to get work done without risk, meaning that there are those persons who now understand if my work finishes at 5, then I get in my car or I get on the bus and I go straight home. So if I don't have to be on the road, then I don't go on the road. Now, once we get that into people's mind, that during this period of the epidemic, that you're going to use your time productively, and the other time that you have, you're going to be safe. I think that is the idea that we are trying to communicate. We are seeing that behavior, and so we are saying, all right, let us now move to increasing the productive hours of activity. Let's do that. Now, if it turns out that people are taking it now to go and party and do all kinds of activities that would place us at risk, then we will have to resume to the original hours.
And sir, the work from home, yes.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The general work from home order remains in place and has been extended and modified. So during the period April 8 to April 21, all persons who can work from home should work from home. During that period, an employer may permit the employee who is able to work from home to work from home. And in relation to an employee who is not able to work from home, the employer may nonetheless permit that person to work from home in order to care for an elderly or ailing family member, a child of the employee, if there is no other suitable childcare arrangement available for that purpose. So we have listened to the feedback in relation to how the orders are working generally and what modifications are required. And also during the period April 8 to April 21st, we ask that no adverse consequences be imposed on employees in relation to persons who have attained the age of 70 years or more, or persons who exhibit flu-like symptoms. In other words, do not require them to come to work. And in addition to that, we have imposed a duty on persons who are ill to stay home. So work from home generally, you can make your arrangements with your employer, and we did, yes, if you're ill with flu-like symptoms or respiratory symptoms in particular, ill with them, not just having them, if you're ill with them. Because we understand, according to the CMO, that a number of persons may have the symptoms generally. So we're looking at the illness. And we maintain the direction that, in relation to the grant of permission to an employee, it shall not count against the leave entitlement of the employee unless otherwise agreed between employer and employee.
Thank you, AG. Yes. The time being, sir, 7:11, which gives us 49 minutes before the curfew orders are imposed. We'll take our final question, which comes from Ms. Zara Burton at 18 Degrees North. Zara?
Hi, everyone. This is for the CMO. I wanted to get clarification from yesterday about use of rapid tests. Where are we on that now in terms of a policy to use or not use them? Also, something that the AG just said a while ago kind of confused me. Maybe it might confuse others as well. What does it mean to be ill with symptoms versus to have symptoms? And if you're an essential worker with symptoms, would you qualify for a test to be done? And just generally about test kits. Is there a shortage at all, or we're all covered?
Thank you, Zara. The CMO will answer all the questions.
That's 888-663.
Okay. All right. The rapid test kits. All right. Right. Okay. So at this time, as of today, we are not using rapid test kits. We have enough capacity to do the PCR, which is the viral testing, and so we continue to utilize that method of testing. So that is our stand at this point, and we do have capacity. Our issue at this time is to get in as much samples as we can for testing. With regards to being ill with symptoms and ill without symptoms, is that it?
No, it's a work from home order. The clarification is if you're not with symptoms and it is not a respiratory disease, should you come to work.
Okay. If it is, no, I'm confused, honestly.
I'm sorry for any confusion. The provision in relation to staying at home is that if you have attained the age of 70 years or more, or if you exhibit flu-like symptoms or respiratory symptoms. I think that meets the clinical order that the CMO is giving, again, for containment of the disease. You should stay home if you're ill. Stay home if you have flu-like symptoms. Stay home if you have problems with your respiratory system. And stay home if you are 70 years and over. And we still provide the exceptions for the necessities of life.
So there may be a clarity between respiratory symptoms and flu-like symptoms, because there are persons who will have flu-like symptoms who will have fever and respiratory symptoms, such as sore throat, cough, runny nose, stuffiness, etc. But then there are persons who have respiratory disorders who do not have an infection, like asthma, who may be coughing. They also would need to stay at home because they are at risk.
Thank you so much, CMO.
But what about the essential workers? If you have a cold or if you have these symptoms and you're an essential worker?
So let's you know,
like influenza. So those persons may settle down, and once they settle down, then they can return to work. But if you, regardless of who you are, if you are having respiratory symptoms, if you're having fever, respiratory symptoms, then you must stay at home. And if you're having other respiratory symptoms like shortness of breath, wheezing, that is not related to an infection, then you should also stay at home.
Thank you, CMO, AG, and Prime Minister. Your final words, please.
I hope that clarifies to everyone. So the issue is, if you are 70 years or over, there's a way to say it, but I won't say it that way. Stay home. If you have flu-like symptoms, you're coughing, sneezing, sniffling, your nose is running, you have a fever, stay home. If you have respiratory illness and you're symptomatic, you're short of breath or so, stay home. That is, the order is designed to keep the population that may be transmitting. We don't know, because at that point we would know if you are, if you have the coronavirus. But it could be that is the case, so the order is designed to have you separate yourself from the healthy population and stay home. Of course, you should try to resolve it, get in touch with your doctor, seek medical advice. If you have to go out on the road to get to a doctor, then you must cover your nose and mouth. That is, you must wear a mask. That is the essence of the order. Just to repeat that the curfews that we have outlined, the exemptions that were previously outlined, those exemptions remain. I think everyone here is exempted: cabinet staff, OPM staff, the CMO and the permanent secretary, the members of the media, JIS and OPM media, all exempted. However, just as an example, if you leave here and go and stop somewhere like a bar or somewhere that is not supposed to be open, and you are stopped by the police, you cannot claim that you are OPM staff or cabinet staff or the permanent secretary. You are exempted for the purpose of your employment. So you could only be exempted if you presented your ID and you are coming from home to work or work to home. That must be absolutely clear. So the exemption is related to your employment. The other point is that you are required to provide identification. You are required to provide identification from your work or a government ID or some other form of identification that will declare to the policeman your job and the justification for your exemption. So it means, therefore, that everyone who is so exempted would have a duty to make sure that they have identification on their person at all times during the course of the curfew orders. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have taken up enough of your time. Thank you so much for listening, and may you have a peaceful, reflective Easter.
Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste. COVID